Hey, what's up, you guys? This is Movie Critic Rob here with the Movie Channel, and this is the fourth installment of movie discussions. And we're going to talk about something which, with the rise of what I call franchise filmmaking, meaning like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the DCEU now taking off, Fox's films, and all the other adaptations of games and books and everything going on today, because I feel like that's what we're in right now is the golden age of franchise filmmaking. I wanted to discuss something which I thought was very relevant, and it's this. I realized watching all those films and going to movies and theaters that there are really two kinds of films. There are character-driven films and plot-driven films. And I was talking to my friend because we were talking about the upcoming release, Civil War. I haven't seen it yet, but I've been reading all the reviews about it, and I'm completely excited. And talking about movies like Deadpool and Batman v Superman, which released. I've seen both of them, and I have my comments on both. But watching those movies and just watching movies in general, one thing I noticed is that, like I said, there are two kinds of films. They're plot-driven films and character-driven films. Now, if you want an example of a character-driven film, look no further than the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I feel that the Marvel Cinematic Universe amplifies this, and it's where that's their bread and butter. When you look at from their very first installment in the MCU, Iron Man, all the way up until the last installment, which was Ant-Man, all of these films have a common thread. Even the team films like Avengers and even Winter Soldier, because they had different Marvel Avengers characters in it, and Age of Ultron. There is a over reliance, and I don't use that term negatively, of character, and I think in a way that it helps us as an audience. Meaning, when it's a character-driven film, you get to focus on the characters, and the characters drive the story. And I think Marvel excels at that because, and look at the box office profits for the MCU, and you know that people are turning out in droves for the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies. Now, let's contrast that to a plot-driven film. And for a plot-driven film, I'm going to go to Fantastic Four, the newest one, and also Green Lantern. Now, if you've noticed, I've just listed two movies that I really don't like, and a lot of people really don't like. And here's the problem. And there are plot-driven films that are done well, don't get me wrong, but I want to use those two as a prime example. Because in those movies, you kind of felt, and even the George Lucas prequels of Star Wars, there was a natural progression of events, meaning you were going point A to point B to point C to point D, and it kind of felt like a MapQuest trip instead of a movie. But that's not to say that plot-driven films are negative, and I think they have strengths. But here's the bottom line, and that I feel about both of these films. When you have a character-driven film, one of the strengths of it is that these characters, if they're built enough, they will compensate for a poor script. If you get a good actor to play your character, if you get a good writer to write the character, and if you have enough character moments in the movie itself, you can make up for a really, really bad script. Whereas if you have a plot-driven film and the plot doesn't do right, but you're putting all of your chips in that basket, and the plot isn't right, your characterizations are not going to be good enough because you were concentrating on the plot too much, and therefore your whole film falls. And I feel that if it's a character-driven film, that you have kind of a like a fail-safe in a way. You have like a safety net, because obviously every movie is plot-driven, but in that sense, there are films that give character more time and more devotion than the plot itself. Look at the Chris Nolan Batman films, for example. You didn't feel like they were going to point A to point B to point C to point D. Well, except for one of the films, which was The Dark Knight Rises. You felt like the characters were driving this story and were driving it to a conclusion. And you don't know where it was going, and you liked it because you were on that ride. I think that the negative aspect of the plot-driven films, again, like I said, if you don't have a good plot behind your characters and your characters themselves are not that interesting, then you have shot yourself in the foot twice. Whereas, like I said, if you, like, for example, let's take one of the weakest of the Marvel films to date, which I'm going to use both of them, Iron Man 2 and Thor 2. Ironically, they're both sequels, but let's take both of them. Iron Man 2 and Thor 2, a lot of people can agree, and I think a lot of people have agreed with me in that they're very muddled. Iron Man 2 is a muddled film trying to cram too much in, and the plot becomes kind of a mess. It's enjoyable, don't get me wrong, but it's kind of a mess. Whereas Thor 2, the first and second act are really good. You know, we're going on this cosmic adventure. That kind of falls apart because you kind of feel like you're getting to that place, and the place that they end up going is not grand enough, and it doesn't really make sense to the plot. That being said, being a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie, the real draw of the films, especially when with Thor, is characters like Loki, like Thor, like Iron Man in the case of Iron Man 3 or Iron Man 2. And because they have learned through the universe that if you have strong character moments and strong character beats and really have the character center of it, everything around it is excused. I often say that good characters can wipe away a multitude of sins when it comes to the plot, and it really can, because at the end of the day, the protagonist is there so that you have a person to root for. And I'm not going to use the term hero or villain because sometimes, you know, you have an anti-hero as your protagonist, and you root for the character even though he might not be always right. Like, for example, Punisher was a good example of this in the TV series or the Netflix series Daredevil season 2, which he's not on the good side of the law, and he very rarely does things that are good, meaning that society would call good, but he has a reasoning behind why he does it, and it really, he has a ends justify the means mentality, so you end up rooting for him. So it's not always, you know, hero and villain, but protagonist. You are going on this journey with this protagonist, and whatever movie it is, and if the protagonist is well done and you're invested in the character, no matter if the plot, no matter if the villain or the antagonist is bad, you will still like the movie movie to give it a second, third, and fourth viewing because you're invested in the character that they have created. One movie that I think suffered from this, from not being a good character-driven film, was Batman v Superman. Now, if you've heard my reviews, you've heard that I really want to wait until the ultimate cut of Batman v Superman, just because I feel that some of the character beats were kind of lost in the editing room for the theatrical cut, which could be in the ultimate cut based on what Zack Snyder has said. So I'm gonna really hold off until I see that movie to get my final thoughts in. And I probably, as soon as it comes out, I'm probably gonna do the second thoughts movie review, and I'm probably gonna change my mind, and it's probably gonna be an epic movie. And it's not bad. It's just it was kind of disappointing. Partially because you never had an established antagonist and protagonist. Civil War is going to be something which tackles this, from what I've heard, which you really can decide on your own which is the protagonist and which is the antagonist, and both do things that can be seen from an antagonistic point of view or a protagonistic point of view. And it kind of lets you choose who you align with, and it kind of challenges you, which I like that. But here's the thing: if you're going to do something like that, you have to be invested in the characters, and you have to give the characters enough gravitas and enough moments to have the audience that are watching these protagonists, antagonists, care for the conflict on the screen. So I'm really looking forward to Civil War in that aspect, because everything I hear, all the reviews that I've heard, every single one has said that you really get your money's worth as far as story and action, and I've heard this in different reviews, that character is defined through action, and it really is. What a character does more than a character says is what defines him. And I'm excited to see in every movie that I watch how a character goes through a scenario and barrels through that scenario, and you're rooting for him even though he might not be the best person. For example, if you've ever seen the David Koepp movie Sleepy Hollow, Secret Window, which is an adaptation of the novella Secret Window, Secret Garden by Stephen King. The main character, Mort Rainey, which is played by Johnny Depp, I'm not going to spoil the twist, but if you've read the novella or if you've seen the movie, you know that the protagonist does some questionable things, and you're really called into question whether or not you're rooting for this guy at the end of the movie and who you're rooting for at the end of the movie. And I like that because they gave us scenarios, and the whole film is character driven, because you're really spending time. There are some scenes that you're alone with this character and his dog in his house alone, and he's writing because the writer, kind of like The Shining. And the same with The Shining. It's funny, both of them are Stephen King adaptations, but The Shining is one example of a film where the protagonist, I don't know about how good his intentions are, and most of you have probably seen the Shining or read it enough to know that there's some twisted things going on there. And so you're kind of challenged as to who you're going to root for. And I like that. I like films that challenge that. But in order to do that, you have to establish these characters, give them enough moments, give them enough beats, give them enough story, enough to drench the character, and give them enough to do so that you as a viewer, by the time that you're presented with the conflict, are engaged in the character. So like I said, when it comes down to it, there are really two kinds of films: plot-driven films and character-driven films. Of these two, I believe, just from watching movies and analyzing movies, that character-driven films are the best, because you have to have a plot in a movie. If a movie without a plot doesn't go anywhere. But if a plot is the only thing that's driving your film and you don't give enough attention to the characters, then no plot is going to save a bad character, and no plot is going to make you interested in a bad character. And a plot-driven film can be done well, but you really have no safety net, in that if your plot fails and you haven't put enough detail into your characters, you kind of shot yourself in the foot twice on that. But I'm really interested to see what you guys would have to say about that. Something that's been on my mind for a while, and I kind of wanted to do a video. I haven't done a video for you guys in a long time, and I kind of, especially with the rise of what I call the age of franchise filmmaking that we're in today, with everything being made into a movie that can be made into a movie, every video game, every comic book adaptation, everything. And I don't feel like that it's a bad thing. I think because, especially when you twist the adaptation, you don't do a straight adaptation where you have surprises for the audience, it can be done well. And I don't think that we're going to get franchise fatigue. I don't think we're going to get tired of these films, because there is no way to categorize the films. For Civil War was a good example, and Thor and Guardians of the Galaxy and Iron Man, where they're in this universe and they are superhero films, but they're different genres. One is a space epic. One is a comedy like Ant-Man. One is a political thriller. And there are all these different things that you can throw with these characters in mind, and you get all these characters to go through all these adventures, so you keep getting more and more invested. I think that is the cream of the crop of storytelling, where I think it was either John Campea or John Schnepp or somebody over at Collider, when they were doing the review of Civil War, they said that the MCU was really a TV show that you're having to wait months between episodes. And it really feels that way, because you're going through all these films, maybe, different protagonists in each one, but then when they come together. But when you sit there, you're watching the next part of the story. And when the other characters come into the fray, when you're talking about a solo film and they come in and they team up, you're really engaged because you're like, ooh, this character just went through this, so I wonder how he's going to react when he's put into a team scenario. So, and all of this really serves good storytelling, and I don't feel that it's going to slow down if it's done well. And that's the thing that I want to stress, and why I think the DCEU needs to get successful and get their act together with their stories and their movies, because more competition, because we have competition by way of Fox now with the X-Men films, and their Deadpool movie was outstanding because it was a character-driven film, not a plot-driven film, which the character was so strong that it carried the entire film, and the supporting characters were so strong that they carried the film, and the plot was simplistic. But I want more franchises to get on the horn and to be successful, because when they are successful, then they'll challenge the ones that have already been in the game, and we'll get better films. Competition breeds betterness as long as there's no bitterness. Oh, that rhymed. I like that. Competition breeds betterness as long as there's no bitterness. And I've said it before, I'll say it again, there is no Marvel and DC schism. There is none of that. There is only healthy competition. And I'll tell you what, if superhero films are what we're going to see for the next 10 years, I'm down, because we have 3 different studios giving us 3 different visions of different characters that we've come to know and we've come to love, and I'm excited for it. I'm excited for that. And I'm excited for original films too. If an original film is done well and given a good character and a good story, then you can be engaged. 2 examples of this are Birdman and Whiplash, where both of these were standalone films, not connected to anything, but you were so engrossed in the characters and in the story and in the filmmaking that you transported yourself, and it was great just as a standalone film. But like I said, post your comments down below, like, share, and subscribe to my channel. This is Movie Critic Rob here with the Movie Channel, and I'm signing off.